Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And oh boy, what a Sakhir Grand Prix we had. Bahrain delivered yet again, and this outer layout proved to be a gem of a race. We had drama all over the place from start to finish going into the weekend. It started last Monday even, Monday night with Lewis Hamilton testing positive for COVID-19 and George Russell having to replace him in the Mercedes and all the storylines that have evolved since then. So plenty to talk about and recap in this episode, along with the Snowball Derby and how that turned out, and some interesting notes that have broken over the past couple of days as well. But before we get into all that, how you doing today, Kyle, after a wild weekend of racing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Today was technically our last day of classes for the semester, so it's nice to have that all nice and done. Still a couple of projects to finish as the week and even into next week a little bit go along, but for the most part, we're all done and dusted, which is nice. And this weekend delivered in terms of the racing because it wasn't just the Sakhir Grand Prix for F1, the support races with F2 I was able to watch because of the nice pushback time difference. So it wasn't the egregious like 3 a.m. start times for F2. It was a nice 7 a.m. start time and then a nice couple hours in between for F1 as well. So got a nice amount of sleep this weekend, feeling rested, feeling good after a good weekend of racing.
Yeah, it was definitely that. This was the first race the entire year for F1 that I was able to watch at a decent hour. So that felt really good. I didn't have to stay up late or get up in the middle of the night or something like that. I got to watch it at prime time, 9 a.m., and boy, am I glad I watched it live. But before we get into the race that was, because it's going to take a while to get through everything that happened in that one, we start off today with some news from the Truck Series camp once again and in the KBM camp as well again. So news that maybe I wasn't expecting, that's for sure, in terms of how it all unfolded here, as Chandler Smith will race full-time for KBM in the Truck Series in the number 18 truck. And subsequently, Christian Eckes is on the way out of KBM and will not be driving for that organization next season and will be looking for a new ride. So huge opportunity here for Chandler Smith, but it's definitely a controversial decision by many, and including myself. I don't know if they just don't have the funding over there at KBM or they just don't want to put the investment into making a third full-time truck that runs for the points. They already have 3 full-time trucks with whatever Kyle runs in, and then their kind of cycle that they run through for the 51 truck. But they have always had 2 full-time trucks for many, many years now with the 4 and the 18. And we've seen a numerous number of drivers go through that stable and work their way up even into Cup now with William Byron, Christopher Bell, just to name a few. So it's been quite the successful kind of pump out of prospects at KBM. The last 2 seasons, though, haven't been as rewarding for them with their drivers, and they're making a huge switch up over there. New crew chiefs, a completely new full-time driver lineup with John Hunter Nemechek taking over the number 4 truck, and now Chandler Smith taking over for Christian Eckes, who I always thought Christian Eckes was maybe one of the next best things in NASCAR. I thought he was primed to be maybe a replacement down the line for someone like Denny Hamlin or something like that, because it seems like about 4 or 5 years or so from now, Hamlin may be on the way out, just based off of what we've seen other people drive. And Eckes was kind of in that zone that he could go through the rankings and maybe win a championship in the Trucks or Xfinity Series for JGR or KBM, and then make his way up to Cup. But this move totally throws that out the window, really. A guy that KBM has invested a lot of time into, ran a lot in the 51 truck. I've always thought that was a telltale sign that whoever was in the 51 truck, Harrison Burton was in there for a while, and then they proved that they would like Harrison Burton more, so they moved up to the Xfinity Series, and so on and so on. So this is a very interesting move. I don't know if I'm a fan of it or not. Obviously, Chandler Smith has got great potential here. Ran really well in the Snowball Derby this past weekend as well. So the future is bright for that young man. But Christian Eckes is definitely a talent that I think that Toyota may be wishing that they didn't let go of so soon here. But what are your thoughts on another driver move over there at KBM, Kyle?
Yeah, it's the shakeup of KBM continues because this year it wasn't just the driver lineup or anything as well. It was also the crew chiefs as well. And back-to-back years now with brand new driver lineups here. And it's a very different kind of look here with somebody who's a bit more veteran there and John Hunter Nemechek versus what has been all of these kind of years in the past, which has been brand new Toyota development driver steps into that seat, runs there for 1 year. And if they have any kind of experienced driver in that seat, it would be a driver in their sophomore season. It's a very different kind of look to the team this year in the Ford truck. And then they're pairing John Hunter Nemechek with probably Toyota's next big thing in Chandler Smith. If you look at his results in some of the lower series in ARCA coming up, he's had spectacular results and was kind of matching Sam Mayer along the way until this past season. Mayer kind of took that next step while Chandler Smith kind of stagnated a little bit this year, but he's kind of the next big thing for Toyota, and we knew that he would be full-time somewhere, and we expected it to be with KBM because that's been the progression with Toyota development drivers, but we didn't know kind of how it would happen. As you mentioned there, we kind of figured that given the circumstances of it all and Eckes being a pretty good driver in his own right, that we thought that it would be 3 full-time trucks for KBM, but it doesn't appear to be going down that route because both Lessard and Eckes, the 2 full-time drivers for KBM last year, are now out of seats in Toyota at least, and it's 2 new drivers stepping in there, and there's no signs pointing towards a 3rd full-time truck. So it's definitely interesting the way that it's gone down. The Nemechek one came out of left field. The Smith one was much more expected, but I don't think anybody expected it to be at the expense of Eckes either. So it's very interesting how this is all played out. I definitely agree with you there that a couple of years down the road, we might be looking back at this and saying, yeah, putting Smith in the truck was the right decision, but at the expense of Eckes, I think that you probably should have tried to figure something else out there. But we don't know what's going to come from Christian Eckes yet. He put out a statement basically saying that he's thankful for his time at KBM for what it's taught him, but he doesn't have any plans yet for next season, and remains to be seen where that happens. Maybe he stays in the Toyota camp, maybe something like McAnally with that new team, maybe they open up a second truck. There's still a couple different options for him in the truck series with Toyota. Or maybe he goes down the route like guys like Noah Gragson did, like Rafael Lessard is now doing, where they moved manufacturers on the way up or even in the truck series after either moving along from KBM or being let go of KBM. Todd Gilliland moving over to Ford with Front Row, like all these kind of examples here. It's been quite the pipeline for KBM. It's kind of stalled out a little bit in terms of the success in the truck series these last couple seasons. And I think that's why we're seeing all these big changes coming up here. It's going to be fascinating to watch that team next year for sure, because they're going to have a lot of expectations from Nemechek going back down to the truck series, where he's going to be expected to essentially win the championship in addition to multiple races. And a guy like Chandler Smith, who has been tabbed as one of the best prospects coming up in NASCAR, is going to be quite the interesting duo to watch and see how they perform together next year.
Yeah, I'm just not 100% sold on the move. I think Eckes showed real good promise in mostly every event this year, besides getting that win. I don't know if that would have done him, but when you look at Lessard, he won a race and he's out the door as well. I don't know.
Todd Gilliland won a race and he was out the door.
Yeah, there's a lot of – I would love to know a little bit in the internal discussions at KBM and what the rationale is behind it, because they wanted to go with a veteran lineup, but Chandler Smith is kind of the opposite of that. He's a young driver, inexperienced, but he is a very good talent. There,
essentially. He's the next guy. That.
But having John Hunter Nemechek, Christian Eckes, and Chandler Smith would be an incredible trio. And it's not like they've never run 4 trucks before. They have in the past with when Kyle wants to run the 46 truck, and they have the 51 still running on the weekend as well. They can. I don't know if it's just with this entire year, if just that's really put a dampening on the success, and Kyle not winning races doesn't bring the amount of money in as well. That's a huge determinant on how much funding that they bring in. So when you win races in the Cup Series, that probably translates to how much money he puts into the Truck Series. So if he had one more this year, maybe we're looking at 3 full-time trucks, but with the lack of success in the Cup Series is a nice way of putting it for Kyle Busch this season, then this is maybe the kind of trickle-down effect that it has on that. So it's an interesting decision. Maybe they just want to stick with 2 full-time trucks and they think that's what works best for their organization. I don't know. I wish I did know. I wish I did work for KBM, but nonetheless, I think it is a great move to have Chandler Smith full-time. And it'll be very interesting to see where Christian Eckes ends up here at the end of all of this. Maybe he doesn't even get a full-time ride for next season because it is so late in the going here. We're into about the mid-December, I guess, close to that now. And the season is almost 70 days or so away. So it's not too much time to get turned around here for the Truck Series or in the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series. It makes you wonder a little bit why JGR maybe wouldn't have thought about putting Eckes in the 18 car in the Xfinity Series. When you look at Daniel Hemrick coming in there, I think they would much rather have a young prospect like Christian Eckes in the 18, just so that they have some sort of depth to their organization, because they're letting these go left and right, and it's not like there's enough. They have the 2311 Racing now that they could maybe put some Toyota development drivers in there down the line as well. So it's a bit of a scratch your head kind of move in some respects, but at the same time, it makes sense. It's just a very weird kind of situation over there at KBM. If John Hunter Nemechek isn't full-time in that team, we're looking at Chandler Smith and Christian Eckes full-time, but with that drastic decision going from the Cup Series to the Truck Series for JHN, because I just try to abbreviate it there, it just really restricted their opportunities here and their possibilities for next season. So we'll see how Chandler Smith does in his rookie season full-time in the Truck Series and see if he can make the playoffs, because that's obviously what they're expecting him to do. And with the competitive level that the Truck Series has right now, it's going to be a tough task for him. But I thought I saw when Eckes ran 51, when the 51 truck for KBM, I thought he showed a little bit more promise at around the same age in that truck than Chandler Smith has done this past season. Smith did a great end to the season, but I thought Eckes was better throughout. He just got in some bad circumstances sometimes, and he's just never got that breakthrough win, which I feel like he's so deserving of. It's very unfortunate that he has not been able to break through on that. So what are you thinking for Christian Eckes' future here, Kyle? Do you think that he goes full-time next season, or are we looking at maybe a gap year here and he tries to find something new in 2022?
It's definitely a tough time for him to kind of be on the market now, because there are quite a few different seats that may have been attractive for both parties that have been filled up. And the first thing that obviously comes to mind is just GMS, because that is the team that has kind of plucked away some guys from other teams at times. And we saw that with Rafael Lessard going there for at least 12 races, maybe full time. But if Lessard and Eckes are both available earlier than maybe expected, maybe we don't see Chase Purdy in that full-time seat replacing Brett Moffitt, and maybe we see somebody like Eckes getting that full-time seat, or Lessard getting that full-time seat, and then the other one kind of splitting a truck. Or, and this is something that's interesting because they've kind of said that they're expected to go with the same lineup, but when somebody like Eckes becomes available, I think that's maybe somebody that you mix things up for a little bit, is ThorSport. They don't really have any young guys coming up. They don't have anybody.
Oh, what a dynamic
really
that would be!
In well, that too.
Ken Rhodes as his teammate.
I'm just tossing it out there right now.
Oh man!
But when you look at that team, it's a pretty old team, especially when you look at the way that kind of the Truck Series has trended recently, and you look at the results of somebody like Johnny Sauter last year, and even a couple years now. Would somebody like Eckes maybe entice the Ford camp to pick him up and maybe put him somewhere like at a ThorSport? That could be an option. Obviously, the Ben Rhodes thing would be an interesting dynamic, to say the least. But there's a lot of different possibilities here. Another thing could be maybe it's just KBM moving on from him, and he stays in the Toyota camp. And there's the 54 car that's running full-time next year in the Xfinity Series that only has 5 confirmed races right now with Kyle Busch. There's a lot of open dates for that.
Very
Could
true.
he move up to Xfinity, just run a part-time schedule? Maybe that's something that we could potentially see. So it's not all doom and gloom for Christian Eckes at this point. But there's definitely not a ton of options remaining, and I hope he gets something figured out soon, because he's definitely a talented driver. This season maybe didn't necessarily go as expected, but if you look at how the previous season went for KBM, he made the playoffs, and he looked solid at times, and he finished runner-up a couple times as well. So it's not like he had a bad season by any means, and I thought he was in line to get a second season at KBM there full-time. I think everybody kind of expected that. And it's just unfortunate the way things have played out for him here. I hope he lands on his feet, though, in competitive equipment.
I'm looking at maybe that 38 truck as a potential option, with Todd Gillen maybe moving up to the Cup Series to replace John Hunter Nemechek. I don't know. That's a huge jump for him to make, but if he has the funding from his father and a little bit of backing over there, obviously that previous relationship, I could see Eckes maybe taking that.
Or even if Gillen doesn't take that like giant step or anything like that, and he stays in the Truck Series, maybe Front Row opens up a second seat. Like there's a lot of moving pieces, and especially in Xfinity and trucks when they don't have those lineup caps, where there's a lot more fluidity to these situations, especially when somebody as talented as Christian Eckes becomes available. So silly season ain't slowing down anytime soon. I wasn't expecting this one today. It's kind of crazy. And there's another rumor that we'll get to here in a minute that kind of surprising a little bit. But it's been crazy. And with somebody like Eckes all of a sudden on the market, I'm sure we'll get another kind of surprising move, and the domino effect will continue on.
This silly season has got the go-go juice, man. It's just crazy. Ridiculous.
All of them do.
I don't think in all my years of being a NASCAR fan, I don't know if I've ever seen this dramatic of a shakeup from season to season. I mean, this is just unheard of, the amount of movement we've seen across all three series and in different sports. I mean, nobody's happy with where they are.
Yeah.
Nobody's happy with where they are. No team is happy with who they've got. Or sponsorship money, or somebody has more money, and yada, yada, yada. It's just insanity right now. I can't keep up. Twitter's just going nuts. But I mean, this is just another one to the already long list that we've made on this show so far.
Well, geez,
and we didn't even start the season. I mean, we came halfway through. I feel like we've had 3 seasons worth of news.
It's
just
crazy.
In the past
but
6 months.
There's so much every single time. But then before we start the show, we're like, okay, let's just do one more search through Twitter to make sure that we got everything, because there's just been so much. And even with the season in NASCAR being done for a couple of weeks now, we're still getting pretty big stuff, like a top prospect like Chandler Smith replacing another pretty solid prospect in Christian Eckes. So ain't slowing down anytime soon.
No, it isn't. And it continues on with the next bit of news we got here with IndyCar's Santino Ferrucci is rumored, it's not official, but it's highly speculated that he is going to be joining our Motorsports for as many as 20 races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. Santino Ferrucci is one that we kind of heard rumblings about for a little bit now, with his interest in the NASCAR scene, where that was maybe running a truck race maybe to end the season for somebody, or try an Xfinity Series ride here or there. But if he's going for 20 Xfinity Series races next year, that's a huge commitment. And obviously he would prefer to be in NASCAR than an IndyCar with this move, because I don't think he can really balance both here. So what an interesting storyline if this were to become true here, Kyle, for Santino Ferrucci.
Is it the IndyCar Invasion 2.0 starting or something? I
don't know.
I thought it was supposed to be the other way around with Jimmy going over, but no, this is an interesting one, to say the least, because it's a rumor that kind of started a little bit, and then it's just been gaining steam over the weeks, and now it seems like we're at the point where it's a foregone conclusion that he's at least running some races, and it seems like it could be as much as you said there, 20 races with our Motorsports, and that's a interesting one as well, because that's a team that started last year that ran pretty well for a rookie team, going full-time with Brett Moffitt next year. Not for points, though. They're running the full-time, but he's not running for points in that series.
We talked about that.
But opening up a second car and running as many as 20 races, or who knows what it ends up being, with somebody like Santino Ferrucci would be kind of a move to say, we're here to kind of show up. And Santino Ferrucci is a guy that has quite a bit of baggage, to say the least, but this is a guy that has kind of shown himself in multiple different series. He has some former ties to people like Gene Haas as well. So this is a guy that has some ties to both NASCAR, to open wheel, in IndyCar, and everything kind of he has some ties to. But I think that he would be kind of a perfect guy to come over from IndyCar to NASCAR, in terms of he's a guy that would excel in kind of NASCAR's kind of climate versus open wheel. And yeah, IndyCar is definitely more open to kind of the characters and whatnot than kind of traditional open wheel or overseas in the formulas and whatnot. But I think Santino Ferrucci could really thrive in NASCAR, and it's an interesting move that looks to be that he'll make for next season. And we've seen it as well. You would expect him to be very strong on the road courses, just given his background. And our Motorsports looked really strong on the road courses last year as well. When you look at Andy Lally when he stepped into that seat, and he was running top 5 for a lot of those races. So regardless as to your feelings on Ferrucci, he's a very polarizing driver, to say the least. I think that he would be an awesome character to add to NASCAR, to that Xfinity series as soon as next year. And we don't really know what the talent level would be stepping over, just because IndyCar and stock cars are just so different. But hey, sign me up, because I'd love to see it.
That would mean that the 18 car in the IndyCar is then vacant, correct?
You would assume so, because 20 races is committed.
I mean, you can't really balance. You can't find 20 weeks when IndyCar is off.
And the rumor had been maybe Dale Coyne for Romain and Grosjean and stuff like that, we heard. But who knows where that currently stands, obviously, given the events of these last couple of weeks. And obviously the Alex Palou seat is open as well, so maybe that
Oliver Askew's still out there.
Shuts down. Maybe Askew. Yeah, there's a lot of different moving parts, as per usual with these silly season things. But it definitely seems like Ferrucci, and it would also be the right time for Ferrucci to make that move as well, because he's got a couple of seasons of IndyCar under his belt. He's still young. I think he's 22 still, so still very young.
Sure, but it sounds right.
And making the jump now would be good for him as well, because he's still at an age where he's young enough to adjust to the stock cars and learn stock cars at a young enough age. Whereas if he comes over and say 2-3 seasons after running IndyCar some more and then trying to make the jump over to NASCAR, maybe he doesn't get as long of a rope as a developing driver. So if he does want to make the jump to NASCAR, now's the time to do it. I like the potential fit with our Motorsports. And I'm personally not the biggest fan of him, but I would love to see him in NASCAR, because the dramatics would be fantastic.
He's just an entertaining guy. I feel like just on and off the track.
He's a great villain.
He's just he provides a lot of entertainment to any sort of racing event. So, I mean, I would like to see this move happen. And then it also opens up the opportunity for somebody that's on the outside of IndyCar that is wanting to be in IndyCar, take that seat that he's going to leave vacant, because obviously this doesn't seem like the long-term fit for Ferrucci if he's going to be in IndyCar. It seems like he wants to come over here and try it out. And if it doesn't work out, then I'm sure he could probably find something else back in IndyCar or something else. But for NASCAR, it seems like this is kind of a really good fit. Like you said, our Motorsports, kind of a mid-pack team. It's a good place to get your feet wet into NASCAR. The expectations aren't so high that it's unrealistic. So I think it'd be a great pairing with Brett Moffitt as well on most weekends as well. I think that would be a formidable duo. So there could be a lot to be learned for Ferrucci from someone like Moffitt, who has experience and knows his way around most of the circuits that we're going to be going to next season as well. And I mean, maybe Ferrucci can teach him a thing or two around the Coda. So we'll see if that all comes to fruition there for Santino Ferrucci. It's a very interesting one that's really come to light and has definitely picked up the pace over the past even 48 hours. It's basically all but confirmed, it seems. But nonetheless, any final thoughts there for Ferrucci and his most likely move to the NASCAR world?
Yeah, it's been increasingly rarer to see some of these cross-discipline drivers and some of these switches, and it's been a little while since we got one of these, and I'm here for it, because anytime you can get IndyCar to NASCAR, NASCAR to IndyCar, formulas over, I'm always here for any of that kind of stuff. So again, not a Ferrucci guy myself, but I think that he would be a great fit for NASCAR.
Yeah, I guess one must go out, one must come in, kind of thing. We leave. Jimmy Johnson leaves to go to IndyCar. We bring in Santino Ferrucci.
I'm not sure about
it's kind of an unequal trade, but
personalities there. But
I'm gonna need a prospect or a draft pick or something like that. IndyCar. I'm not gonna lie, but maybe a couple championships to go along with that. But nonetheless, it's going to be a very interesting storyline to see when it gets confirmed, or if it does get confirmed, and who maybe takes the place for Ferrucci over there on the IndyCar side of things as well. So that does it for that storyline, and we move on to the spotter switch up from the NASCAR Cup Series here.
Yeah, wasn't expecting this to come this week. I'll tell you that.
A quick little kind of storyline, I guess. Brett Griffin, formerly Clint Bowyer's crew chief. We'll just give you a little bit of the top names that are kind of switching around or even leaving for right now. Brett Griffin, formerly Clint Bowyer's crew chief, or not crew chief, spotter, excuse me, is going to be not expected to do full-time spotting for next season. Bowyer, if you listen to Radioactive, Brett Griffin and Clint Bowyer have probably the best radio communication I have ever heard. It's the most entertaining, hysterical kind of comments that they say during a race that the driver's going 180 miles an hour and the spotter's just up there, going to the washroom or some sort of stuff. That the stories that they tell during the race is just hilarious. So it's going to be unfortunate not to hear Brett Griffin atop of the spotter stand next season, it seems. But if they had to go out, it's a perfect time for when Bowyer is going to be going to the Fox booth. So that dynamic with anybody else other than Bowyer would have never been the same. Earl Barban is an interesting one as well. Formerly Jimmy Johnson's spotter. They've been together for many, many years. I don't even know if they've ever had a different spotter for Jimmy Johnson.
It's been a while.
It's been a very, very long time. Won 7 championships together. Those two. Was a great voice top of the spotter stands for him, and he is no longer at Hendrick Motorsports, as reported by Bob Pockris. So we'll see if he maybe follows Jimmy over to IndyCar.
That was confirmed. Yeah, he's spotting for Jimmy in IndyCar.
Well, that's great. That's a great storyline there. That's those two are basically inseparable, it seems. So a nice move there. I didn't actually know that, but we'll see who kind of takes that spot over there for. I'm guessing Bowman's spotter will come over with him. So who's they did release Kyle Larson's spotter.
Did they?
Yeah. They did release it.
It's tough to keep track of all of the ones, but I think the big one. At the end of the day is Clayton Hughes and MTJ there.
Yeah, it is. As Clayton Hughes, formerly Martin Truex Jr. spotter, will move to Michael McDowell's eyes atop from the sky, as Drew Herring will be the replacement for Martin Truex Jr. for the new spotter. Obviously, if you've listened for the past couple of seasons during the stage-winning era of NASCAR, you would have heard Clayton Hughes' name, or voice, excuse me, quite a bit. MTJ, stage winner for the whatever double-digit number that happened usually. Yeah, it was quite a bit there. 2017 was just basically ridiculous how many times I heard that man's voice during the season. But he's a great spotter. It's an interesting kind of move that they seem like they had a great relationship, Hughes and Truex, but Hughes has got a former relationship with the Michael McDowell side of things, it seems, with the crew chief and that dynamic over there. So it makes sense from that point of view. And Drew Herring was if I remember correctly, drove for JGR in the Xfinity Series from time to time in a part-time basis when they didn't have too many full-time Xfinity Series guys for the points. Drew Herring was in there for the road courses and a couple of other events. I think Iowa, he raced at a couple times as well. So an interesting pairing there. Do you know if he came from anywhere else before this, or if this is like?
I think he ran a few races for the 96. Let's see here. Yeah, 2019. He ran the last race of the season for the 96 in 2019.
Has he ever spotted before? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I think he has. If I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong on that.
You would have to imagine he's done it at some point. And he has been around the track quite a bit and kind of doing spot duty. He's never really ran full-time or anything like that. But it's quite the big shakeup, to be honest, because of the spotters that you kind of know in NASCAR, and usually the spotters are kind of the unsung heroes because you know most of the crew chief names. You obviously know the driver names. But the spotters are a huge part of things, and they're kind of overlooked a little bit. But one of the 100%. Few spotter names that you did know was Clayton Hughes, just because of the sound bites at any of the stages that Truex would win. And
come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely an interesting switch-up. We'll see how things play out and everything like that. But it just definitely wasn't something I was expecting to see.
Two key elements to Truex's championship-winning season back in 2017, Cole Pearn and Clayton Hughes. They're no longer with the driver of the number 19 JGR Camry. So it's an interesting switch up over there. I mean, the spotters, it's difficult to know if it's going to, play a huge impact on the performance.
There's not a ton of analysis
that familiar
you can really
voice
have for it, right?
No.
It's really all just the personal relationship between the two, the spotter and the driver, and
huge
the crew chief
communication
as well. It's all about the communication between the two. There's not really much you can say from the outside. And just finally here on this point, Chris Moniz, who was a spotter for Ty Dillon last year, will be the spotter for Kyle Larson. So that's the trade out for Hendrick Motorsports there.
Yeah, it's it always takes a little bit to get up to speed, especially in speed weeks when it is a huge element. Yeah, you got to know what you're talking about and what each person means when they say something really quickly. So all I can say is I'm happy that Kyle did not switch his spotter. That's basically what it comes down to for me. They finally didn't switch something over there at the 18 camp. But nonetheless, with all jokes aside, it's going to be sad to see Brett Griffin not on radioactive most likely next season. Earl Barbin as well. I'm wishing him all the best over there on the IndyCar side of things with Jimmy. Obviously, they're very, very comfortable together. Have had great success, so I'm sure that will translate. We'll see how Jimmy does in his inaugural IndyCar season for the majority of the time, only a couple races when he's not over there. And then see if Truex wrecks out in the 500 due to lack of communication is essentially what that comes down to. But
hey, all I want is stage winner Michael McDowell. That's all I want.
Stage winner Michael McDowell. For the first time this season. It was just a great thing that Clayton Hughes did. It was always very entertaining. The producers in the truck were always on it. Made sure to get the radio cranked up for Martin Truex Jr. So we'll see if Michael McDowell can give us a soundbite or two maybe next season with Clayton Hughes. But nonetheless, an interesting kind of shakeup there with the spotters, the unsung heroes for sure, I'd say, on race day. So that does it for that. And then we move on to the Rolex 24 news, as we've got Jimmy Johnson, Simon Pagenaud, Kamui. I was going to say it, and I messed it up. Kamui Kobayashi and Mike Rockenfeller will drive the Action Express number 48 DPI Cadillac, and the Rolex 24 Ally will be the sponsor of that car. So they're going for the big prize in the Rolex the big class. And this is a all-star lineup. Very familiar faces for both the endurance side of things and the usual sports that we talk about with IndyCar and NASCAR with Simon Pagenaud and Jimmy Johnson. I think this is Jimmy's first Rolex 24 as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
he's ran it a handful of times in the past.
Really?
He ran a bunch in the mid-2000s there.
Back when he was the hot shot, hey?
So Daytona prototype at Daytona. Yeah, he's ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Yeah. Last time in 2011, though.
Damn. Well, you got me flabbergasted. That's great, hey? So not the rookie that I maybe thought Jimmy Johnson was going into this weekend. So this is a formidable lineup. Quite the I guess quadruo, if that's even a word, with the 4 drivers over there for Action Express. So, I mean, the expectations are very high for this lineup going into it, and maybe anything short of a win would probably be a disappointment here, Kyle.
Yeah, going into things, maybe it's got to be up there as the team to beat. It'll probably be there, depending on what other lineups we see, but it'll probably be up there with the lineup that Chip Ganassi puts out. But this is a very, very strong lineup. You look at Kamui Kobayashi's won back-to-back 24 Hours of Daytona with the Cadillac as well, so he's very familiar with the car. He's done it with a couple different lineups as well. But this is a completely different lineup. You've got a guy coming over from NASCAR in Jimmy, who's got some sports car experience, but it's been a while, but you would expect him to be pretty solid in that. Simon Pagenaud, of course, who has done quite a bit in his own right. And then Rockenfeller as well, who has been pretty strong coming over and running a few Daytona races. But this is a very, very strong lineup. We don't know too much about the lineups coming into things at this point. But as it stands right now, this is going to be a tough lineup to beat because Kamui Kobayashi is probably the best sports car driver in the world right now, whether you just look at his results over in Le Mans, over when he's done Daytona, in WEC as a whole. He's been phenomenal, hasn't quite broken through to get that Le Mans victory quite yet, overall victory, but he holds the lap record over there, and he's won back-to-back Rolex 24s. Simon Pagenaud has been very solid in his own right. Ran the Rolex 24 last year with Acura Team Penske. He's going to do it in the Cadillac this year with them switching over. And then Rockenfeller as well is kind of the one that maybe, or certainly is the least known name, but he's got some really good results in his own right as well, coming over from DTM primarily, but has run the Rolex 24 as well in the past, just in the GTLM class. So he's making the step up to the DPIs. He should be a pretty solid one to round out that lineup, but big expectations for this lineup. Anytime you have Kamui Kobayashi in a sports car, you're going to have high expectations, and that definitely doesn't change here going into the 2021 Rolex 24.
It's going to be one heck of a race. I don't know how much I'll be able to tune in for the 24 hours that it is, but hopefully for the majority of it, I'll definitely be trying to stay tuned. I think it's on NBC, as it has been in the years past as well. So kind of kicks off Speed Weeks in a sense down in Daytona, really gets you kind of pumped up for the season ahead. So very, very excited. We'll see where Chase Elliott ends up. He's been rumored to go to the Rolex 24 as well. Does Kyle Busch come back as well for his second year running? Haven't really heard too much on his front. So it seems like Chase Elliott is most likely the current Cup Series guy that will try to run it in some sort of capacity there. It's going to be a busy offseason. He just ran the Snowball Derby, which we'll talk about in a bit. And he's most likely going to be running it. We'll see where his plans end up falling. But for Jimmy Johnson, Simon Pagenaud, Kamui Kobayashi, as I got that name right this time, and Mike Rockenfeller, it's a huge opportunity to go out there and win one of the biggest endurance races of the season, besides Le Mans and even Sebring a little bit as well. But nonetheless, Daytona is a huge one, and we'll see how it all pans out for them come I guess late January.
Yes.
Yeah, late January. So any final thoughts on that all-star lineup that they've got?
Well, I love the fact that they're going the 48 number as well. There was definitely
Jimmy's the head of that team.
Plenty of options, but hey, you know what? I feel like Jimmy definitely has the biggest attachment to any number out of that foursome. So I'm glad that they went with that number. And as it looks right now, I would guess that Chase Elliott ends up running with the 31 Action Express team with Mike Conway, Pipo Derani, and Felipe Nasser. That's probably where he ends up, which would be another very good lineup. So it's going to be a great showdown for the DPIs, because you've got that 31 team where I would guess Chase Elliott's added as the number 4 there. Or maybe there's a third Action Express entry that we don't know about yet. The 48 obviously is the one that we know about and is going to be very strong. And then Wayne Taylor Racing over there with Felipe Albuquerque, Elio Castroneves, Alexander Rossi, and Ricky Taylor. Like we're going to have a great battle for the Rolex 24 this year. And that's not even including whatever Chip Ganassi does with their lineup, because they've got Kevin Magnussen, Ranger van der Zande, and Scott Dixon there. They'll add a fourth driver to that mix for Rolex 24. But you've got 3 or 4 really star-studded lineups going into the Rolex 24, which is going to make for a great event. And that's not even including some of the lower classes as well, which might get some different drivers in that mix as well. So very excited for this upcoming Rolex 24.
For sure. We move on to the SRX Racing Series. Another driver has been added to the lineup, as Ernie Francis Jr. has been named the next competitor for this series. Got to be honest, I'm not too familiar with him at all before coming into today, before the news was announced. He is a 7-time Trans Am champion, and he's only 22 years of age, so I think he's the youngest by far of any of the competitors that are racing in this series next season. So very, very interesting move there to have a young gun kind of challenge these old wily veterans. And Francis Jr. has also raced in the NASCAR K&N Pro Series East in 2018 and 2019. So I watched a quick video or listened a little bit earlier today just to try and get a little bit of information on him. He's tried to maybe he's been thinking about going to Europe and try something, but it's just been a hard go of things for his family. It's the family and the funding is just not there to support to go over to Europe and try something with open wheels. So he's waiting for that next big opportunity, and maybe this is a great chance for him to show himself on a big stage like on CBS Sports for next summer's. I'm imagining a good turnout in terms of viewership, so we'll see how he performs next season in this newly formed racing series led by Ray Evernham and Tony Stewart. It's been a little bit since we've had to have anything really on this series, about a month or so, I'd say, since the last bit of news came out from this side of things. But Ernie Francis Jr., what are your thoughts on this addition to the new racing series?
Yeah, I similarly didn't know the name beforehand, but this is exactly what the series is for. They said going into things that is going to be this kind of all-star kind of group, but it's also going to give some chances to kind of shine for maybe some drivers that we don't know, and whether that be kind of short track guys, maybe some dirt guys, or in this case, somebody from Trans Am here, and Ernie Francis Jr. I really like the move. He's obviously by far the youngest that's been currently named for the series, and he's the first one that isn't kind of this legend that we know that's trying to make a name for themselves. So that's what the SRX has been branded as, kind of this opportunity for some maybe unknown drivers, in addition to kind of bringing the spotlight back for some of these higher end drivers. And I'm excited to see it, because that's what this kind of series should be for. Seeing the likes of Tony Kanaan and Tony Stewart and all these kind of guys racing again is fun. But those guys are done the major parts of their career. The exciting part about this series is that it brings that name value, but also gives the opportunity for some guys like Ernie Francis Jr. to come up, maybe surprise some people, show up, maybe win a race or something like that, and maybe turn some eyes, get some sponsors, and help himself along his career. So very excited to see what he can do and see as this series adds more names. I saw just a few minutes ago that they released kind of the final mock-up for the cars as well. So things are starting to kind of snowball here, no pun intended, for the Snowball Derby this weekend, into the series that we'll see next summer.
It's fascinating that this series has taken so many different forms here, with legends of different motorsports coming over and giving it the shot in their inaugural season here. So we'll definitely talk about that as the months go on here and we get more information. The full schedule still hasn't been announced yet. They've teased a couple of things. They've done pretty good on social media so far, so hopefully they can continue that presence, and we'll see how it all unfolds when it comes to the summertime in 2021. So we move on to the F1 news of this episode, Kyle, and a bit of it's disappointing, I'd say, is probably the best one. Romain Grosjean will not compete in F1's season finale in Abu Dhabi after the incredible accident that he had in the Bahrain Grand Prix over a week's time ago. And it was always optimistic for him to race in the season finale. It just seemed, with the severity of the burns on his hands and the one on his foot as well, that it would just take too much time for him to heal properly and get the most out of the car and feel comfortable and not harm himself anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions going back into a car that nearly took his life, but also saved his life at the same time. So it is a sad note, but a bit on a positive note as well. Mercedes has already offered Romain Grosjean the opportunity to drive one of their cars as a farewell and like a one-off test session or something like that, to give him that one last thrill behind the seat of an F1 car before he departs the sport entirely after the end of the season. So not the way I'm sure Romain Grosjean would have wanted to end his F1 career in a ball of fire, but I'm sure he's very, very thankful that he is here with us today. We talked about this last Monday. We broke the wreck down and everything in the aftermath of that over the past week as well. So bit of a sad news here for Romain Grosjean to go out like this here. It is what it is in that sense. But you obviously are happy to see that he's on the mend and he's doing well. He flew back home to see his family, was able to be with his kids and his wife. So that's the most important thing for Romain Grosjean right now. It was a very bittersweet kind of moment to see him back in the paddock on the Thursday and saying goodbye to his team over the weekend as well, because he won't see them most likely again for a while. So unfortunate for Romain Grosjean to go out like this, but at least Mercedes is providing that opportunity for him to get one last shot or one last farewell or goodbye to the sport that he has invested so much time and so much love into, Kyle.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it was expected. It would have been a big task for him to be ready to go for this upcoming weekend in Abu Dhabi. And it's better for him at this time to be at home and be with his family recovering from this. It's unfortunate that this is the way that his Formula One career will end. But as you mentioned there, it already seems like he will get one more test at least with something. We don't know if it'll be Mercedes. They have offered the seat, but maybe we see a reunion with one of the teams that he used to drive for, or maybe even just Haas and one final run around with them. But it's good to see that it won't be the last time he's in an F1 car at least, but it is unfortunate that will be his last race.
It is. I mean, I can't imagine the emotions that he feels, kind of thing. He's destined to kind of finish it on a high note and just run the season out, and everything gets thrown upside down in the matter of a blink of an eye at Bahrain. So it's just very, very unfortunate and sad to see that this is the way that he had to go out. And obviously that was not his goal. He was working out already when he got back to the track as well, in hopes of trying to race in this upcoming race in Abu Dhabi. But it's just too tall of a task for this man. So, I mean, he's defied everything to get to this point with the safety that we've got and the miraculous evacuation that he got from the car in the ball of fire. So it's just incredible that he's here with us right now. But at the same time, it's not the way that we would have liked to have seen Romain Grosjean go out in his F1 career, which much would have rather preferred him cross the finish line and take that checkered flag for one final time instead of go out the way that he did. But we're happy that he's still with us today. So Pietro Fittipaldi will complete the season for Haas F1 team as a result of that. Made his debut this weekend, which we'll talk about in a bit as well. And it's just a sad note here for Romain Grosjean to go out in the way that he has. But on a more positive note, the F2 Championship wrapped up this past weekend in Bahrain on the outer circuit. And I didn't jinx this one. Mick Schumacher brings home the F2 Championship, holding off Callum Ilot's kind of subpar weekend for both drivers in the feature race and the sprint race. By 14 points, it ended up being the margin of victory for Schumacher. A very challenging weekend for both drivers as well. So didn't quite get the go out and glory, kind of go out on the podium or a victory for either driver this weekend, as it was confirmed that Callum Ilott will not be racing in F2 next season as well. But Yuki Tsunoda was the big winner this weekend, finishing first in the feature race and second in the sprint race. Huge weekend for him. Kyle's prediction on the Thursday episode of him finishing third in the Drivers' Championship comes to fruition. So this man just cannot do no wrong. That is Kyle with predictions. But huge weekend for Yuki Tsunoda, and doesn't dampen his chances of already a very likely or speculated move to AlphaTauri next season, depending on what happens with that Red Bull seat, which we'll talk about in a bit, how that all unfolded this weekend. But a huge weekend for the Japanese driver in his rookie season in F2, finishing third in the championship, only 1 point behind second in Callum Ilott. 15 points short of the championship is nothing short of spectacular for that young man. Nikita Mazepin was definitely one storyline this weekend as well. Was driving like a maniac, in all honesty, in both races. And I couldn't believe that he got away with the stuff that he did. If he was an F1, he would get resurrected or condemned, with the moves that he made. It was just utmost disrespect to his competitors in how he was driving. I mean, I am all for trying to defend your position, but driving somebody into the braking marker, it's a bit too far for me. But we'll talk. You can discuss this a little bit here, Kyle. But that was kind of the storylines of the weekend. Schumacher bringing home the F2 Championship, continuing his run of struggling in the first season in a Formula Series and then winning the championship in the next. I don't expect it to happen in Formula One, but if it does, what a storyline that would be. But Mick Schumacher already confirmed to go to Haas next season in Formula One, and Callum Ilott falls 14 points short of the ultimate prize, and Yuki Tsunoda was a big talking point. And Nikita Mazepin, after all the glory that, or maybe glory isn't the right word, but the news of him going to F1 as well next season, it didn't quite look good on him in terms of the racing this weekend. So what were your thoughts as a whole from the F2 finale weekend?
Yeah, it was great racing. And even with the Mazepin incident in the feature race and the defending in probably quotation marks, it was something to watch, that's for sure. But yeah, I understand why, but at the end of the day, you just can't do that. And it wasn't just the incident with, I believe it was Drugovich behind him, that he drove essentially into the, or was it Druval? I can't remember exactly who it was in that incident, but he also ran Tsunoda off the road as well, as he made the pass for the lead in the feature race as well. So, yeah, stuff like that to clean up for Mazepin, but we know that essentially at this point. But overall, yeah, very happy for Mick Schumacher. Wasn't a great weekend by any means, but it was enough to get the job done. For Callum Ilott, he needed a big weekend, and that didn't come. But the big weekend did come for Yuki Tsunoda, as you mentioned there. First place in the feature race and drives up to second place as well in the sprint race. Just a fantastic event for him. And a Carlin 1-2 as well in that last race of the season in the sprint races. Johan Daruvala gets his first win as well. So, yeah, it was a great weekend there. And with that, F2 wasting no time. We've already had a handful of driver announcements for next season as well, and some interesting ones that will probably feature into the championship battle as well. We know that Callum Ilott won't be returning to the series next year, which makes sense when you think about it, just given it's not like this was his rookie season or anything. So why stay for a third year in that respect? Maybe he ends up as a reserve driver for one of the Ferrari teams next year in F1 and maybe get some seat time like that. That might be better for him going forward. But with that, Prima as well, having a seat open with Mick Schumacher, making the step up, and they won the constructors as well in F2. So with that, a couple big spots open for some drivers to make the step up. Robert Schwartzman announced yesterday that he will return to Prima. He's got to be one of, if not the championship favorite next season, just given how spectacular he was as a rookie. And when you look at the top three, Schumacher's in F1 for sure. Ilott announced he won't return, and Tsunoda we expect to make the jump up to the AlphaTauri seat. So if you go in that order, fifth as well isn't returning because Mazepin's up in Formula One. So it really does leave the door open for Schwartzman to step through and take that win. Joining him next season will be Oscar Piastri, the Renault reserve or development driver, who won F3 this year with Prima. So he makes a step up to F2. That's going to be an interesting duo to watch next year. And to that point as well, Callum Ilott not returning to UNI Virtuosi. So in steps Felipe Drugovich, who had a very, very good end to the season, picking up that feature race win in the first Bahrain, the main layout, picking up a podium as well in the outer layout in the feature race as well. So he had a few good results this weekend or these past couple of weeks that will continue on for him as he makes a step up in competition as well. So still lots and lots of news to come in terms of who will be racing in F2 next year. I'm sure we'll get much more rookie news. We'll see if maybe a couple more of those F3 drivers make the step up. I think the one that many people are waiting and watching for over here is what will happen with Logan Sargent and whether he will make the jump to F2 for next season. Of course, the big American hopeful to make the jump to F1. He's the next one from America that looks to be the one that could be on course for Formula One. We'll see if he makes a jump to F2 next year. But a very entertaining championship all year long, a good weekend to wrap it up as well. And I'm sure everybody is happy with how things finished out.
Yeah, I certainly am. Congratulations to Mick Schumacher on completing the championship run. That was very competitive, down to the wire this year. A very, very entertaining battle. And, if it goes one more week, who knows what would happen if it goes to Abu Dhabi. I mean, it would have been all for the taking with three guys there. So unfortunate in that respect, but Schumacher did everything right this season. Consistency paid off. Maybe didn't get the race wins, the total that is on the grander scale that we've seen previous F2 champions get. But at the same time, a championship is a championship, and I feel like it was in Formula One. It's difficult not to deserve a championship with this points format that they've got. So when it's season long, Schumacher definitely deserved it, and Ilott plays second fiddle to this one in the championship. So we'll see how his off season goes and where he ends up for next season. Like Kyle said, reserve driver most likely, or We'll see what happens if he takes a gap year here. Something similar to maybe like the likes of Antonio Giovinazzi when he finished second in F2 and then had to kind of wait a year or something like that. We'll see how that all unfolds. I remember it was Pierre Gasly who took a gap year as well and couldn't race the next year, and he was just kind of sitting around, and look where he is now, an F1 race winner this season. So we'll see what happens with Ilott, but congratulations to Schumacher. Congratulations to Tsunoda on a terrific end to the season. We'll see if he ends up in Formula One next year. So that's all the news and notes that I've got, Kyle, and it's time to get into the Sakhir Grand Prix weekend that was. Where do you want to start with this? I mean, qualifying, we can get that out of the way relatively quickly, but the race itself, we've got quite a bit to unpack. So without further ado, let's get into qualifying as Kevin Magnussen, Nicholas Latifi, Jack Aitken, don't forget, is replacing George Russell this weekend as Russell takes over for Hamilton in the Mercedes. So Aitken in the Williams this weekend, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. So he's out in Q1, but he was ahead of Latifi for the most of Q1 up until that last run where Latifi just edged him out. So impressive from the British driver there in Aitken in his F1 debut to come that close to beating Latifi, who's been in the car all season long. Very similar on the Mercedes side of things, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. Kimi Räikkönen, rough go of things there in qualifying, just didn't have the pace and was kind of out. It seemed like maybe he would go for last run, but I'm guessing he wasn't happy or something like that. So he ends up P19, and then Pietro Fittipaldi filling in for the injured Romain Grosjean is last in Q1. So those are your eliminations, your typical suspects on the constructor side of things. No real shock there. So we move into Q2 as Lando Norris. A bit of a disappointing qualifying for him, no doubt. It was just kind of they put him out early in the last run, and then he kind of had to take a lap and then got shuffled into the traffic. It was just kind of a mess there by McLaren when they sent Norris out there for his final Q2 run. Giovinazzi did a nice job there in 14th place. Sebastian Vettel there in 13th. Alex Albon, a very disappointing qualifying session there when he showed that after the podium in the Bahrain regular GP that we're very accustomed to, looked good in the practice speeds as well, was a bit comparable to Verstappen, so you thought maybe that confidence from last weekend would translate. The qualifying speed did not, so he qualifies P12, and Esteban Ocon is the last guy to be eliminated in the qualifying sessions in P11. So we move on to Q3. Mercedes goes out 3 times in that last session, as this is a 55-second lap, so you have the opportunity there with the 12 minutes in 10 or 12, whatever it is for Q3. I believe it's 12, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they would have gotten 3 in 10 minutes, but nonetheless, they were the only team, I think, to try that as well. So Mercedes, just that further ahead on the grid in itself, they are outthinking their opponents one step at a time, and this was a clear evidence of that. Valtteri Bottas holds off his teammate in George Russell to win the Sakhir Grand Prix pole, but it was by the slimmest of margins, as it was 0.026 seconds that was from Bottas to Russell, and then Verstappen keeping it nip and tuck there in Q3 as well, only 0.056 behind Valtteri Bottas. So we were expecting it to be close in qualifying. I don't know if we were expecting to be that close. Kyle knocks it out of the park with this qualifying prediction, with the Bottas getting the pole, Russell second, and Verstappen third. I had Russell on pole. I was very close, but the wily old vet in Bottas just squeaks it out there to start first for the Sakhir Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, that was probably the biggest storyline for qualifying, as we were expecting Ferrari to basically be nowhere this weekend, and Charles Leclerc brought that Ferrari up into a miraculously competitive spot in P4. He ran 1 lap in Q3, and he said, I can't do better than that, and I don't blame him.
I don't think you would have,
it's going to be very damn difficult to beat that lap. And behind him there in 5th, Sergio Perez, Danny Kvyat, Daniel Ricciardo, Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, and Lance Stroll round out the top 10 going into the Grand Prix on Sunday. Lando Norris would take a penalty as well, just because he was back in 15th. He would start from the rear of the grid, takes an energy penalty to get a fresh one in there for this event. So that's all the storylines going into the Grand Prix. Obviously, the notable ones that we talked about on Thursday, the Russell, Fittipaldi, and Aiken filling in for their respective spots and constructors. So we go into the race. Qualifying itself, though, Kyle, I mean, it delivered to the highest regard. George Russell keeping it very, very close. Couldn't have slipped up any more than he needed to there, or else Verstappen would have been right there in second place and Russell back to third. So he did his job. Mercedes front row lockout. So what were you thinking going into the race? Because you predicted it, so you probably had a good idea of what was going to happen in this race from what we talked about on Thursday. But with all jokes aside, what were you thinking going into the Grand Prix?
It was all about that battle off the start, and it was Bottas and Russell on the front row, and I'm sure a lot of people were hoping that Russell would be able to pull out that qualifying, get that pole, and continue on the streak. It was unfortunate that it didn't continue just because of how close it was.
Fourth longest in F1 history.
Exactly. So when you look at the final qualifying grid, though, Charles Leclerc, what an absolutely insane lap. Like
2/10 behind the leaders. Like,
come on, like that's ridiculous in the state that Ferrari's in right now, and making Sebastian Vettel look like he's completely out to toast. And we'll see what happens next year.
Out to toast. I've never heard that before.
Hey, you know what? We'll see what happens with Vettel next year, and if he actually is kind of washed and whatnot over in Aston Martin. Next year, I think that's where we'll get kind of the feel for things. But Charles Leclerc is just otherworldly at times, and we saw it in this qualifying session, P4, when he probably should have been at most in the bottom half of the top 10. Just a stellar lap, and to that point as well, Daniel Kvyat, I don't think he got enough love this weekend. He had a spectacular weekend, qualifying P6 in the AlphaTauri, and Pierre Gasly, who has been the story of the season for basically the entirety of it, qualified P9, and Alexander Albon P12 as well. So just a stellar qualifying session as well for Kvyat there. Those were the two kind of standouts for me. And to that point as well, we were starting to see some of those engine problems as well. Racing Point, we're talking about how they were on older engines, down on power. McLaren had tons of issues, whether that was science in practice. Norris had issues in practice as well. And at the end of the day, or at the end of qualifying as well, Norris took the grid penalty there because the engine was in such rough shape. So, there was a lot of different things to watch going into the race. But, of course, we were all watching for what would happen between the two Mercedes at the front and whether Verstappen could get in that mix as well. So there was a lot of storylines to watch throughout the grid. But really, the biggest and most important one was at the front there between Bottas and Russell.
Yeah, it's difficult to overlook what that kind of race was anticipating and shaping up to be there at the front with the Mercedes, because Russell was fastest in both practices on the Friday. Then Bottas came back on the Saturday, and Russell kind of struggled in the practice, but then solidified himself as a top-tier driver on the Saturday in qualifying. His qualifying streak of 37 races, if I believe, about qualifying a teammate falls 0.026 seconds short of happening to continue that streak. So unfortunate there for Russell, but he was looking ahead to the race, very uncomfortable with the car. He said the entire weekend just trying to fit into Lewis Hamilton's seat and into that race car that's designed specifically for that height and weight. So, I mean, it was not an easy task for George Russell to do what he did this weekend, and boy, did he ever impress. But we'll talk about that as the race goes on here. But without further ado, let's get into the Sakhir Grand Prix. As we go to lights out, George Russell gets a terrific getaway and takes the lead from Valtteri Bottas in the first corner. Huge overtake there to get the pace and set the pace out front, and just have that clean air is just going to do wonders for a guy, and the confidence that it would do for someone like George Russell, who I'm sure the nerves were high going on to lights out, but it didn't really show. He gets the lead from his veteran teammate there in Bottas. Bottas gets loose on the entry of turn 2, and then backs up Verstappen as he has to check up, allowing for the competitors behind him to try and overtake around the outside, including Sergio Perez, as he was going around the outside of Verstappen on the straight up to turn 3. Then Leclerc, very, very aggressive here, dives up the inside going into turn 3. Leclerc locks up. And unfortunately, Sergio Perez's right rear tire was there, and Leclerc breaks the front suspension on his car. Perez goes spinning and lands back on all fours, thankfully for him, which we'll talk about in at length, I'm sure. And Verstappen has nowhere to go. Usually the aggressor in terms of these starts trying to make up for the positions was very cautious on this one, and it actually ended up costing him on this occasion as he had to go wide to avoid the spinning Perez and the contact from Leclerc, who had lost his front suspension, so he's not going to be able to turn the car. So Verstappen goes kind of around the outside of turn 3. And then, unfortunately for him, there's gravel that looks the exact same color as pavement, and he can't stop in the gravel. So he goes straight into the barrier. Leclerc and Verstappen out of the Grand Prix, less than, 25 seconds in. So very unfortunate there. Verstappen looked like he could really, really challenge the Mercedes this weekend with the pace that he showed in practice on the long runs and just how close he was on the qualifying speed as well. So unfortunate on that sense that we may not have gotten the battle for the win, or what it turned out to be, I guess, 8th and 9th, what it was, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. For Verstappen, he was definitely in prime position to challenge the Mercedes this weekend, and it was all for naught after Charles Leclerc makes a kind of a rookie mistake here. There was no real where for him to go. It was just kind of an accident waiting to happen. As a result of this, he gets the 3-place grid drop for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix because the stewards believe he was at fault for the actions, which I'm in agreement with that. But what were your thoughts on the kind of incident there? Perez would be able to continue, I should add, as well. Falls to last place on the opening lap, but he was able to continue. But what were your thoughts on the opening lap carnage that was in turn 3?
Yeah, it was all, for me at least, on Charles Leclerc there, just trying to do too much. And that's something that he's had to do all season with that Ferrari, is kind of go over that limit at times to kind of try and get the most that he can out of that car. And on that first lap, when everything's essentially equal, he needs to try and go out and get those positions and keep people behind him for as long as possible to finish as high as he can. And in this situation, he just tried to force something a little too much. And there's not much you can say for Sergio Perez there because he's on the outside of the 3 there. And he doesn't know that Leclerc's going to be there on the inside when he starts to turn in. So, and unfortunate in that regard, and it's unfortunate that it ended up being such a big train reaction that it was, where Verstappen avoids it and goes off into the gravel, and he's out, and Leclerc's out as well. Thankfully, Perez was able to continue, so we didn't lose 3 major players in the race. But yeah, it was just Leclerc trying to do too much at that point. And you could see it with as big of a lockup as he had going into the corner as well. And you heard it with his comments afterwards, and from Verstappen as well. Didn't mince too many words in that interview afterwards. But yeah, just trying to do too much in that situation, but you also can't blame him for trying it at the same time as well. But he did end up getting a penalty. I think it's a 3-place penalty for the start of Abu Dhabi. So the stewards agreed in that regard there. But unfortunate that it ended up taking out 2 major players in terms of qualifying pace, at least.
Yeah, I don't know what we would expect from Leclerc in terms of race pace. I imagine he would have maybe fallen through the field, maybe the back half.
And we saw it from Vettel, who didn't have much pace at all.
Yeah, I mean, Leclerc's just kind of been that one step ahead of Vettel on these kind of dry tracks this season, about 4 or 5 positions ahead of him on most occasions. So you'd think something around there for Leclerc if the race continued. But for Verstappen, just another missed opportunity this season, getting wiped out for nothing of his own doing. And it's just been kind of that season. Either it's a podium or he kind of gets taken out or something happens to him that's not really of his own fault. He's actually done a very good job this season for Verstappen. It's just bad luck that it has bitten him on multiple occasions. So unfortunate there for the Red Bull driver who, or for the organization that is in constructor, left Alex Albon out there all by himself in P12. So disappointing for Red Bull. Just kind of the tale of two stories here, with Verstappen being so close at the front and then getting wiped out, but then Albon disappointing and then somehow getting the finishes in some respects. So unfortunate there, but a guy that was on the optimistic side, Lando Norris gained 9 spots in that entire excursion.
Goodness.
Went from 20th to I guess it is 11th or 10th around that time when Perez dropped back. I guess it was about 10th. So I haven't seen the onboard from it yet, but I'm sure it was a great kind of 3 corners for him as he worked his way up 9 positions. So great start there for Lando Norris to regain that lost track position and then some from his grid penalty there. So we go to the safety car restart. Obviously, a safety car would come out because of that incident. Carlos Sainz briefly gets past Bottas, but then he runs wide on the exit of turn 2, allowing the Finnish driver to get past him again. So the Mercedes fight at the front was still very much on. And it was kind of in a dry patch here in the race, though. After that kind of safety car, it was fairly straight going. The midfield was very tight. Sainz was kind of leading a train full of the Renaults and the Alpha Tauris and his McLaren teammate in Norris, and as well as Albon in there as well. So it was kind of like a mix of a whole bunch of different characters from about 3rd to about maybe even 10th or 11th. It was quite a long train that they've got there. Lance Stroll was in there as well. Perez was trying to work his way back up from the back of the pack all the way to the front. So he was very entertaining to watch as the runs went on. But we jumped to around lap 46 after Russell's pit stop. He reports he has no power, but it seems fine as he sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix right after that radio message comes in. But I do think that there was cause for concern throughout the remainder of the race after he set that fastest lap. It seemed like he was struggling at some times with the power of the engine. I don't know if it was just a mode that he was in. Obviously, getting familiar with the car was a bit of a tough task for a guy that had to adjust to so many different buttons and what everything meant. I mean, he didn't know probably half of what he could have known about that Mercedes car just from the couple of days that he was on it. But gave me a bit of a heart attack there, a mini one, when he reported that, because Russell was firmly in control of this race up to that point, holding Bottas to about a 3-second lead. Not too big, not too small, kept him out of DRS range. So it seemed like Bottas didn't really have anything for him with Russell out in front. And obviously Russell, being the first car, he gets priority. So he pits a couple of laps before Bottas does, extends that gap to about 8.5 seconds, I believe it was, over Bottas. Then he trimmed it down to about 5 seconds. But after that, it kind of stayed steady. So it seemed like this was George Russell's race to lose up until we're getting to it. The VSC for Nicholas Latifi comes out first, and he would be actually out of the race as a result of that. So a very questionable pit call here as well during this point of the race, as Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo, P3 and P5 respectively at that point in time, pit at the worst possible time as the VSC was ending. Obviously, during the virtual safety car, the entire pack slows down and keeps a delta to the car in front of them. And as soon as they enter the pit road, the VSC ended, so they go up to racing speed. It doesn't really help their case in terms of the time it takes, because it does because the cars on track are going much faster when it's regular speed than it is under VSC conditions. So unfortunate there for Sainz and Ricciardo, and it could have actually cost them a win, this strategy here as well. So very, very unfortunate. But I mean, hindsight, it's 2020, right? You probably wouldn't pit there if you're McLaren and Renault at the end of the day. But it's unfortunate for those guys to have maybe the possibility of a win, which we'll talk about in a second here, how it all unfolded. And Perez takes advantage of those errors, so then he moves up to P3. Now we get to the other Williams here. Nicholas Latifi out of the race, unfortunately here for Jack Aitken in his F1 debut. He loses his front wing on the exit of the final corner as he spins and hits the outside wall, bringing up the VSC initially, and then the front wing was just lying there in the middle of the track. It was, with the distance between cars and how short the lap is, it was just not safe and unrealistic to send a marshal out there to try and collect all the bits and pieces. So it ended up going to a full safety car, and this is where the race turned upside down. I still cannot wrap my head around everything that happened there. But before we get into that, any thoughts on everything that's happened up until that point there, Kyle, with Russell reporting that into the pit wall and Ricciardo and Sainz's pit strategy?
Yeah, like you understand what Ricciardo and Sainz were going for. Sorry, I should say McLaren and Renault were going for. If the VSC stays out for 10, 15 seconds longer. It's an excellent move by them. They're able to get that track advantage by pitting under VSC where cars are going slower. So of course you naturally gain that time back. But it was just the worst timing possible for them, because just as they commit to that line and cross over it, the VSC ends and you're back to green flag conditions, and played into the hands very, very well of course, Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, and Lance Stroll in that case, as they take third, fourth, and fifth out of that exchange. But yeah, looking back on it, that's essentially what ended up winning the race for Sergio Perez in that case. It's funny how being in such a bad situation to start the race ended up playing into how he ended up winning the race by the end of it, in the fact that his pit strategy was kind of off from other people. So he wasn't in a situation to necessarily pit under that VSC, whereas Sainz and Ricciardo were ahead of them. So they go ahead and pit. VSC ends as they commit, and the rest of them go flying by. It's unfortunate because Sainz, of course, at Monza was so close to the victory, and this one he doesn't even have the opportunity to go out and get it at the end of the day. Same for Daniel Ricciardo. He could have been in great position as well if Renault doesn't pit, but you never know in those situations. Damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. And when you're in that situation, you have the opportunity. 9 times out of 10, you take it and you come out of it with the advantage. It would just happen to be in this case. It was a pretty quick cleanup, and in that case, the VSC came out at the worst possible time for those two. And would have been great to see how the battle would have gone if they hadn't have pit under the VSC, and how things would have played out in that situation, because Sergio Perez was a man on a mission to that point. My God, was he incredible to watch during this race. But yeah, unfortunate in that regard, but again, played directly into the hands of Perez, Ocon, and Stroll.
Yeah, exactly. So there was 2 VSCs there for both Williams guys, and then this one ended up being the full safety car, like I said before. Yeah, rightly so. And this caused maybe the turning point in the race, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say.
Well, I mean, there's multiple. I mean, you could go a whole bunch of different ways in terms of how you want to do it, but basically, I mean, I can't quote Toto Wolff because we want to keep this show PG, but I mean, it was a colossal F-up for Mercedes in this pit stop, as they double-stacked both drivers, Russell in the lead, Bottas in second, and there was so much miscommunication there. It was unbelievable. Reminded me of kind of Ricciardo coming in Monaco a couple of years ago, and the tires weren't ready, and it was just mayhem in the pit stall. So I don't know what the heck happened. I don't know how the heck they messed it up. A team as prestigious as Mercedes is, and how perfect they are basically every single weekend, it's very, very unfortunate how the events unfolded. So Russell pits, and they have a really slow pit stop. It seems like the tires weren't ready, and there's some confusion there. So kind of put them off. Russell slid a little bit farther in the box as well. So they put him on the soft, or I guess the medium compound tires now with the yellow stripe tires, and then they pit Bottas, and then they put the soft or the medium, the yellow walled tires on, and then they take them back off because they realize that they have Bottas's tires, or part of Bottas's tires, on Russell's car, which is illegal, which we'll talk about in a second. So they put the hard tires back on Bottas, so he effectively doesn't get a pit stop there, and he loses track position as well. So that entire sequence is about 25, at least 35 seconds or something like that, and it forced the 2 Mercedes to lose track position to Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, and Lance Stroll. So the Mercedes guys go back to 4th and 5th at the end of the – well, Russell keeps the lead, but then we'll move on to the next lap here, as George Russell has to come back down pit road after getting told that he has the wrong set of tires on, as he has Bottas' set, like I said earlier. And so then Russell comes out behind Bottas in P4 and P5. Sergio Perez takes the lead at that point in time of the Grand Prix. Esteban Ocon goes to second, Lance Stroll goes third, Bottas fourth, and Russell back in fifth. But Russell puts on a fresh set of mediums so that he can go full-blown at the end. Bottas is not told to come back into pit, which is an interesting decision as well for Mercedes. They put him on the defensive here at the end, with the old hard and the hardest compound tire there that they had in the white wall tire. So massive chaos here, Kyle. I don't know how else to describe that, but if you watched the race, I'm sure you were just as shocked as I was. I could not believe what I was watching, that Mercedes would A, make that big of an error, and B, Russell was at the expense of it in a weekend where he was set to go on to win the race, most likely very easily here. He had the race in control, and it's just such irony that the car that he leaves brings out the safety car and virtually costs him a chance at maybe victory here.
Just brutal luck for George Russell in that case, because we never see the stuff from Mercedes. It was a tight window to go down and pit under the safety car there, but it was something that they needed to take just given the situation of their tires. Everybody being backed up, everybody behind them would have been on newer tires. And we saw on the ensuing restart just how slow Bottas was versus the rest of the pack. Because, of course, he ended up putting on the same tires that he had in the first place. So it was the right idea, but the execution was just absolutely brutal. And a double stack is extremely, extremely tough. A quick reaction time like that, where you're going from basically sitting around to all of a sudden needing to double stack, it's a tough task to ask of the pit crew. But the Mercedes pit crew is one of the best in the garage area for a reason, and it was unfortunate to see for George Russell there. It was unfortunate for Bottas as well, because he was charging pretty well before that as well, and looked like he could have potentially made things interesting at the end of that race. But they needed to go down and pit for tires, but basically the worst case scenario there is you mix the one, and then the second one, not only do you have to reverse the mix and put the same tires back on, you also have a brake start to go on fire, and just calamity on all fronts there. And I guess it was more positive for George Russell there, just given that he had the mix on, so he had to come back down. And so in that turn, he goes down back pit road. He comes back out on the fresh tires. So even though he does lose the track position, he has the fresh tires and a Mercedes where he's going to be able to come back and fight back through and potentially make things interesting versus Bottas, who they wouldn't do the double stack again, I don't think. That would be kind of crazy to try it again after you just butchered it so badly. And so Bottas was sent back out on hard tires and didn't have the track position. So it would have been basically impossible for him to do anything at the end of that race, which we ended up seeing play out. So after that incident, it was taken away from the two Mercedes guys, but Russell still had a chance to go back up and drive through and go and try and get the victory.
Yeah. I mean, this kid's a wheel, man. It was just spectacular to watch. George Russell on the safety car restart. Stroll locks up. It was just kind of mayhem going into the safety car restart zone. Perez gets away very, very nicely.
Yes.
Ocon stays in second. Stroll in third. Bottas, and after Stroll's lock up there, it seemed like Ocon kind of checked up, and then it was just kind of an accordion effect back throughout the pack. So Bottas and Russell battle it out there for a couple of laps. Very short period of time, though, as Russell's got the fresh tires and the softer compound on top of that. He gets past Bottas with a beautiful overtake there in the S section as Bottas runs wide on the exit of 3. Then it kind of has to lift off the gas going in to hit the apex for turn 4. Russell hits the apex in turn 4 with full speed on the fresher tires and goes around the outside, which turns into the inside going into the S and on the exit of turn 8 and takes 4th position away from his teammate there. So, I mean, it's just insult to injury for Bottas at this point in time. Like, I mean, the guy that most likely is in contention for a seat here down the road and could be looking at his seat sometime in the near future goes around him like that and with no problem, and just superb talent there from George Russell to go around the outside, albeit on a softer compound and fresher tires, but nonetheless, that is a difficult overtake to pass, or overtake to make, in the dirty part of the track that nobody really runs in all day long. Then Russell's march towards the front and towards his first F1 victory did not stop there as he got past Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon in succession after about 3 or 4 laps there. So he had his sights set on the leader in Sergio Perez, and it seemed all but likely he was going to chase him down there no matter when it got there or no matter how long it took him to get there. He was going to get there, and the only thing that could stop him was some bad luck. And unfortunately, bad luck struck again for George Russell. I couldn't believe it. As soon as I heard Bono come over the radio and say that he had a puncture, I was like, you got to be reporting to Bottas, right? Like, there's no way that Russell's got a puncture. But unfortunately for the British driver, He did. He worked his way all the way up to second, was chasing down Perez in the closing laps, but with 10 laps to go, his bid for his first podium and first win in Formula One and his first start for the Mercedes team goes up in smoke. He has to come down pit road and replace the tires, and they sent him out on the soft compound tires to try and get him some points, which he ended up managing to get. He got up to ninth after coming out around P13 or 14. He was just flying at the end with low fuel, freshest tires. He set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, so maybe that's a little bit of a consolation prize, but I'm sure that it's not. George Russell, driver of the day, voted by the fans. He still gets my driver of the day, just based off of everything that he had to do coming into this race, the preparation, the expectations, the delivery on those expectations, and then some. To fall short of that is just heartbreaking. I can't imagine his emotions. He's handled it like an absolute professional for the young age that he is. This kid is going to be a future Formula One champion and maybe multi-champion if he gets in the right seat. Just an incredible weekend here for Mercedes, for his inaugural weekend for Mercedes, to end it like that, and for the one race that Mercedes makes all these mistakes be him in the car, it's just so devastating. As you know, I was cheering for him this entire weekend. I picked him to win the race. You picked him to win the race. And, I mean, it would seem like a long shot just based off of everything going in. Oh, you can't beat Bottas, who's been so familiar. He outclassed him this entire weekend, basically, leading up to the race and throughout the race. It's just circumstances out of his control behind the wheel of the car that forced him to lose this one. So very, very unfortunate there for George Russell, Kyle, as his time for his first F1 victory may have to wait for some time, or maybe even just in a week's time if he comes back for Mercedes next week and if Hamilton's not fit to race for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Yeah, heartbreaker. That's really the only way to really say it. He was in such a good position, battling back, and it was going to be a great race to the finish as well to see when or if Russell would be able to pull off the overtake on Perez there to eventually get the win. And I haven't seen anywhere as to how the puncture happened. I don't know if you've seen that at all.
I'm guessing it's debris from maybe Aiken and they just missed it, kind of thing.
That's my guess, because obviously you pull the front wing off, but there's always going to be some debris laying around. You can't go out and completely clean it all off and bust out the magnifying glass and look around. There's always going to be fluke things.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a huge puncture either. It was a slow leak, but it would have gone as well. It wasn't like it would just pop like that. It just kind of was a gradual thing. But
and that was part of it as well, because it wasn't necessarily a visual thing where you can see the tire completely shredded.
I mean, Russell was questioning it as well.
Russell questioned it at first, but then as soon as he was told and he started noticing things and it was starting to go, and it was the point where continuing on would have been pointless, because by the time the race ends, the tire would have been completely done and he would have been out to lunch. I got the reference right this time. And
out to toast.
I didn't combine two of them at the same time. But hey, you know what? End of the semester, okay? Okay.
I'm just thinking about food too much.
But then on the other side of things as well, if you go and pit when you know that there's a puncture there, you can at least try and regain something. And that's exactly what happened. They pit him as soon as they know the puncture's there. He goes, pits, gets the soft tires on. He looks like a missile out there. I think it was 14th he came out and gets all the way up to 9th by the end of the race. Superb driving from Russell. Proved a lot of things this weekend. It's unfortunate the end result wasn't there, but he proved that he's a top-level driver that can step in to a Mercedes and put the results on the table for them. We almost certainly won't see it next season. Hopefully we see it this weekend because I want to see a repeat of that. But by 2022, I think this performance showed Mercedes that he's the driver for that seat.
Yeah, I totally in agreement there. Mercedes was on that pit stop incident. We can just cover that quickly. Yes. Mercedes was fined 20,000 euros, I believe it was, for the tire confusion, and it's illegal to send Russell out on the track with tires that aren't his, so mixed set. And thankfully they didn't give him a kind of a points or a time penalty or anything.
That should be the way that it goes, because if you're out running On the mixed set, then yes, a points
If
penalty.
it was
or
green flag conditions, you
something.
probably do give him a time penalty. But if it was under safety car, they reacted quickly.
You fixed your mistake, and I think in those situations you shouldn't be given a time penalty or have your result hurt because you went and fixed your mistake. I think in those situations, give the monetary penalty for having the mistake in the first place. But they rectified it. They didn't gain anything from it. If anything, they lost from it. I like the way that the FIA handled that.
Yeah, and quickly, social media was just like, anybody who gets to that Mercedes is going to do well, basically, is what it comes down to, right? I don't really want to get into it too much because it's just kind of pointless, but just to address it, it's just beyond ridiculous that people try to still make that argument that it's the car and not the driver. What George Russell did in that car this weekend was nothing short of spectacular. Not anybody, some old bloke can go into that car and do what he did this weekend. He is a talent, a future champion, most likely, a current star. He's a current star. Even though he drives a Williams, he is a current star in Formula One. And this weekend proved that he is someone to be reckoning with. The future of F1 is just incredibly bright with the talent that we've got in the top tier seats right now and what is coming along the way here when the current stars and the ones that we've grown up watching are going to retire eventually. It's inevitable, but we've got some great filler people to come in there and make their own storylines. And George Russell made his mark in Formula One. Not that he hadn't already, but to get that first points out of the way, I'm sure it's not the way that he would have liked to. When a win's on the cards, even a podium, I'm sure he would have taken. And nonetheless, after this weekend, it's just such a bittersweet way to end maybe his Mercedes tenure for this season. We'll see what happens with Lewis Hamilton's health. I don't know what I want really for next weekend. If I want Hamilton back in the car or Russell back in the car, just because it is the season finale, I feel like it would just be a disservice to Hamilton on the season that he's had to not be in the car for the final race of the season. But obviously, if he is healthy, they're going to put him in the car. It's just a matter of that. So if you want to address anything on that, but with the people saying that anybody can go into the Mercedes and win, but nonetheless, Russell did a great job.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. If you watch that and your thought process is, anyone can step into that car and perform, I really don't know what to say to you at this point, because that's not the storyline whatsoever. The storyline is, oh my God, George Russell steps from the Williams to the Mercedes in an uncomfortable car and was still able to perform. That's the storyline. It's look how good of a driver George Russell is. It's not, look how easy it is to perform in the Mercedes. That is not what it is whatsoever, because you can look over the entire season and is Valtteri Bottas maybe that championship level driver? No, but he's a good driver nonetheless. Just look at what he was able to do over his career when he was with Williams. He was still able to put results on the board for a team and kind of overperform to a certain extent back then. And he hasn't performed at the same level as a Lewis Hamilton. He hasn't completely swept second places across the board when Hamilton's won. And when Hamilton hasn't won, he hasn't necessarily been the one to win as well. So is the best driver in the best car? Yes, because the best team wants the best drivers in the car so they win the most. Like, this is how this works in motorsports. Michael Schumacher was in a Ferrari because he was the best driver. You can go back as long as you want. Like, this is why the best drivers, you can't just have the argument against Lewis Hamilton, he's in the best car, so he's going to have the best results. Well, then you apply that argument for every single best driver in history, because those best drivers were the best drivers because they also had the best equipment. This is motorsports. This is something where it's not just on your own talent. It also has to be the equipment that you're in. And the best drivers end up in the best equipment because, well, why would the best equipment be used by a driver that isn't the best? That seems counterintuitive. So it's a dumb argument, and the argument is, look how great George Russell is after this weekend, not, look how easy it is to perform in a Mercedes.
The videos and everything that we've seen over the meme videos of Russell and a Williams to a Mercedes has just been pure comedic gold. Just the amount of Top Gear references or Grand Tour and like having Jeremy Clarkson and stuff like that in these kind of compilation videos that I've seen on social media, on Twitter, TikTok, whatever it was. I mean, they were just
F1 Reddit,
beautifully
the memes
done.
that they have. I legitimately spend like a half hour to an hour just like on a weekend just sifting through all the F1 memes because they're so good.
They're so spot on. And I mean, watching WTF1's internet's best reactions from this Grand Prix was nothing short of great as well. Seeing the stuff, the GIFs and everything that they put together with just kind of the storylines that happen, just the storyline in itself of Russell going from the worst car on the grid to the best car on the grid and performing that well just shows you the talent that this guy possesses. So hopefully this isn't the last we see of George Russell in a competitive and fast car in Formula One. Maybe that time will have to wait longer than we would like, but nonetheless, I'm sure that time will happen soon enough. So I think that does it for the George Russell kind of storyline. We can move on to the end of the race. After Russell has his issue with the puncture, Sergio Perez is out on his own island out front as he sets himself apart by around 10 seconds by the end of the Grand Prix as Sergio Perez does the spin and win and goes from last to first in this Grand Prix. Goes from, I guess, fifth to last to first in this. What a weird Grand Prix for him. But he finally gets his maiden Formula One victory in the Sakhir Grand Prix, the longest ever time between a win for a Formula One driver, 190 Grand Prix from when Sergio Perez started this endeavor to winning his first race. What a storyline in the season that he's been told he's not returning to this team for next year. And the rumors have been circulating on what he's going to do for next season. Whether he gets that Red Bull seat for Alex Albon or not is to be determined. It doesn't seem likely from everything that we've heard, but that's still up in the air as of right now. We'll see if this win, this win definitely didn't hurt, but what a spectacular drive by Sergio Perez. If it's any other weekend that Russell is not in the car or anything like that, Perez is the talking point, but it's still Russell's kind of talking point. But we can't overshadow what this man did in this race in Sergio Perez, going from passing literally everybody in the field. The strategy was perfect, putting him on the hard tires to go for him to go long in the race. He said he flat spotted on the first run after he pitted as well, so he wasn't comfortable in the car after he on that first stint, and then puts the hard tires on and makes it last to the end of the Grand Prix and pulls away from the field like it's nothing at the end of the race. Didn't get any damage from that incident as well in that first lap wreck, which is miraculous. We usually see floor damage that really affects the performance of the car. The rear suspension of that thing is just obviously solid as a rock. The 2019 Mercedes does its job basically out there. It's just incredible stuff from Sergio Perez. Esteban Ocon gets second place, his first career F1 podium, and Lance Stroll, the Canadian, completes the podium places in the Sakhir Grand Prix. His second, third place finish of the season, obviously coming back at Monza as well in that hectic race that involved a very kind of crazy storyline with a first-time winner and so on, a first podium as well. So very similar. There's a correlation to the Italian Grand Prix at Monza and this one here in Bahrain. But the story here, Sergio Perez, Racing Point in itself, just a miraculous weekend for that entire organization, having the Pink Panthers on the podium and both drivers.
I am so happy for Sergio Perez. Just the season that he's had, one of the best, if not the best of his career. I would probably say the best of his career. Yeah, in a season where he's been told that he's not returning to the team, in a season where he has COVID and misses 2 races, and yet is still fourth in the Drivers' Championship, by some goes margin. Out and wins. Just an unbelievable story. Longest, as you mentioned, between or most races between a debut and a first win, beating Mark Webber, actually, who held the record That's previously crazy. With 130 races. He beat the record by 60 races, which by F1 standards is like 4 seasons or more. It's crazy. So just unbelievable for Sergio Perez in a season where it looked like his career could potentially be coming to an end without that victory. He goes out and gets it with potentially 1 race to spare, if we're being honest. He could return in 2022 because it doesn't look likely that he's going to be here for 21. And hopefully we see that return in 2022 if things go as we expect with the Red Bull seats. But man, obviously heartbroken for George Russell. But as I said multiple times on Twitter, his day will come. He will be in a top-level seat in no time. He might have to wait a little bit longer. He might have to wait a little bit longer to get to that Mercedes seat, but he'll be in a Mercedes in a couple of seasons. He'll be contending for race wins every single weekend, and he'll be out contending for championships. Sergio Perez, he's not going to be afforded that opportunity for the rest of his career. So it's great to see him break through, get that victory. First Mexican driver to win since 1970 as well. Pedro Rodriguez was the last to do that as well. So a couple big streaks that have been broken this year in terms of nationalities to win. Of course, with Pierre Gasly winning and breaking that French drought as well earlier this season. Just spectacular to see. And not to be overlooked as well, Esteban Ocon in second. He's had a rough year, 2 years. Of course, similarly, losing his seat at Force India / Racing Point to Lance Stroll there, having sit out a season, being a reserve driver for Mercedes there, gets the call back to Formula One with Renault being the French driver there, and gets a podium for that team as well. Just fantastic in that regard. And then obviously Stroll as well in third, getting another podium for his career, and the first ever double podium finish for Racing Point / Force India as well. So love to see all of that. If there was any results where it wasn't going to be George Russell winning, I am extremely, extremely happy that it was Sergio Perez getting the victory.
Well, we did not predict this. I can tell you that.
I had him on the podium at least. Does that count for something?
I'll give you that. You get part marks for this one, but I don't think anybody had this. If you bet on this podium,
you'll be a rich person.
Serious
that's for sure.
dough. I couldn't be happier for Sergio Perez. It's unfortunate with the way the entire silly season has broken down in Formula One for him to be on the outside when he has been maybe the third best guy in Formula One this season.
Too late. Just became available too late. When you look at how silly season started so early this year for Formula One, literally before the first race of the season happened, it just kind of left people like Sergio Perez out to dry, where it's a situation where people don't know he's available. He was supposed to be under contract for next season, and it was just a situation where if he's available earlier, he probably has a seat for next season. But because of the way things played out, he's on the outside looking in, which is unfortunate to say because he is absolutely one of the best 20 drivers available to race in Formula One. And it's a damn shame that he probably won't be.
Yeah, I think the biggest, trickle-down effect is with Fernando Alonso coming back into F1 next year for Renault, then you maybe would have looked, if he's not coming back, Pierre Gasly jumping ship after this incredible season that he's had, maybe go to Renault to pair with that French partnership that they're going with Alpine next season for that team, the French flag, and it would just be a great marketing opportunity there. Then you bump Albon back down to AlphaTauri, Perez goes over to Red Bull, and then Yuki Tsunoda comes into that second AlphaTauri seat. So that would probably be what Red Bull would have liked to have had happen, in all honesty. But with this incredible win that Sergio Perez did, it doesn't define his F1 career. He up to this point, he's been a miraculous driver week in and week out, super consistent, has just been always on the verge of getting that top ride. But somebody else comes along that becomes available that is maybe considered a better driver than he is, when he in his own right is just as good, if not better, than some of these guys that are getting these rides. It's very unfortunate for him that he has not gotten that breakthrough opportunity here. But if he's going to go out of F1 not return to F1 next season, he says he has stuff lined up for 2022 already, if it does come down to that. So hopefully that does hopefully that does come to fruition if it does comes down to that situation. But for this moment right now, if he has to go out and take a year off from Formula One after this, I'm sure this is a great way for him to go out. The emotion this season has brought, this entire year for Formula One, has just been spectacular. The amount of the two different winners in Pierre Gasly and Sergio Perez, you couldn't feel happier for either one of those guys. The George Russell storyline in this race was just magnificent. Obviously not the outcome that Russell would have wanted, and myself included, but if it had to happen with Russell losing this race, I'm happy with the consolation prize that we got in Sergio Perez getting that first win. So just an incredible podium. Lance Stroll, the Canadian, getting a third place. Felt like he could have had a shot at the win. You think Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo would have been right up there if they hadn't made that VSC pit stop.
That battle between Sainz, Ricciardo, and Perez for the win would have been insane.
Yeah, I think there would have been a lot of trading of the top positions or the second place positions there in the latter stage of the race. Esteban Ocon cannot be overlooked, like you said as well. Obviously a former Racing Point / Force India driver, and did not ended up working out over there with the Sergio Perez tangles. And, it was just kind of a toxic relationship over there at that time. But Ocon has done very good. I wouldn't say spectacular this season. He's been solid, very good. Daniel Ricciardo's one-upped them on most occasions every weekend, but I mean, he capitalized here at the very end for Esteban Ocon. Most likely Ricciardo would have got the podium instead of Ocon, but to go from 11th to second in this race is nothing short of greatness for Esteban Ocon. So hopefully this is a great momentum builder for him going into next season against probably his toughest task yet, against Fernando Alonso in Formula One. I mean, that's just how can you compete against Fernando Alonso? We look what happened with Stoffel Van Dorn at McLaren and how bad it ended up looking for him when you put Fernando Alonso against him. Hopefully that doesn't happen to Esteban Ocon, and I don't imagine it will, because Ocon is one heck of a driver. So what a podium. Racing Point, spectacular weekend for them. Esteban Ocon, miraculous drive for him to come from 11th to 2nd, like I said. So what a great Grand Prix for the outer layout at Bahrain. It just delivered. I mean, I love the shorter layout. I mean, I love both layouts, honestly, at Bahrain. I think it's a great mix of racing. It provides a constant level of excitement, especially on a shorter track when you feel like you're always constantly in traffic when you catch the back of the pack. It's plenty of overtaking opportunities to set up runs. It was just a really nicely done weekend by Formula One to set this entire Grand Prix up and make it entertaining for the fans at home. So we'll go through the remainder of the point scoring finishes here quickly. Carlos Sainz there in 4th, so just falls short of his second podium of the season. Daniel Ricciardo 5th, Alex Albon in 6th. So you think Albon would have been able to take advantage of this race. Falls behind both of the Racing Points, a Renault and both Renaults, and a McLaren there in Sainz. So not a great weekend for Esteban Ocon, Alexander Albon. Definitely left a lot on the table for him, both in qualifying and in the race. Danny Kvyat there in 7th place. Valtteri Bottas fell all the way back to 8th with the lack of speed on the tires and the wear that he had. George Russell there in P9, so recovered to get some points at least in the end. And Lando Norris rounds out the point-scoring finishers for this Grand Prix. So any takeaways from that? I've got some stats lined up. You've already taken a couple of them. Thanks for that. But nonetheless, Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, the entire trio up there on the podium was just a spectacular sight.
Yeah, and just quickly on Perez here, you talk about his consistency, and this season I think has been on his biggest display, because outside of the Bahrain Grand Prix, where he was running in 3rd and wasn't able to finish because of his engine, he's finished in the points in every single race he's been in this season. The only time he's finished outside of the points was Bahrain, where his engine expired. It would have been three straight podiums for him, and what a great way to go out with Racing Point here. He's been with that team for so long, through ups and downs, really helped that team even exist to this point, just given everything that was happening with Force India at the end of that tenure, and really helped bring it over to the Racing Point days. It's going to be unfortunate to see his final run with that team in Abu Dhabi, but I'm hoping he's able to go out on another high note, because this is a guy that you don't see tenures like this with a single team in F1 for too much, unless it's a high-end driver with a high-end team. You don't really see this kind of marriage with the mid-pack team most of the time. And so it's been great to see this over these last handful of seasons with Sergio Perez, and what a way to cap it off here with a win in his penultimate race for the team. Yeah,
for sure. And with that incredible weekend that they had with a 1-3 finish, they jumped back into third place in the constructors after it seemed like it was all for nothing after last weekend's retirements for both drivers, with Stroll flipping and Perez going out in almighty fashion in the final couple of laps. Yeah. They take back third, and with 10 points over McLaren going into the final
McLaren to bounce back from that. Yeah,
it's a power circuit, so I don't imagine McLaren may be able to. And with Perez's current form, I don't see McLaren coming back from that unless something happens similarly to the Bahrain Grand Prix with Racing Point. So 10 points there with 194 for Racing Point, 184 for McLaren. Renault's kind of out of it. They're kind of stuck there in fifth, I think, unless they can beat McLaren by 12 points next weekend. I think they're pretty much stuck in fifth.
It's doable, but it's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough. Ferrari's locked themselves in for sixth place. That's crazy to say. Ferrari down in sixth place in the constructors, but they are where they are. AlphaTauri down there, really great season for them, underrated. It's unfortunate that they're all the way down in seventh after such a tight midfield, but 103 points is nothing to be disappointed with. After this season, Alfa Romeo down there in eighth with only 8 points, Haas with 3 points, and then Williams still with a goose egg with points this season. So unfortunate there for Williams. Maybe they can get a point if Russell goes over to the Williams and has that regained speed that he has at Mercedes. If they can provide some last-minute upgrades to that Williams to get him a point over there. But nonetheless, a very compelling constructors battle throughout the entirety of this season in the midfield. And it goes to the final Grand Prix here for that extra 10 or 15 million euros or so for those teams, which is crucial for the next season. So that does it for the constructors lookout. We've got some stats that Formula One was so kind to provide. Kyle took a couple of them already with the Pedro Rodriguez one, so thank you for that, Kyle. Appreciate it. But nonetheless, it's the first win for Racing Point under their current name. The original Jordan team name won 4 Grand Prix, so that's a great story for them. The Pink Panthers prevail in their penultimate race with the current look that they have as well. So they're going to the green, most likely look with Aston Martin. This is almost farewell to the Pink Panthers, unfortunately. So we move on here. Racing Point are also the 36th distinct constructor to win a Grand Prix and the second new winner this season. Obviously, AlphaTauri with Pierre Gasly's win. A very comparable race, to be honest, with Monza in this one in terms of how it all played out. A first-time winner, like I said earlier, and so on with the correlation between the two events. So the 36th distinct constructor there for Racing Point. This is the second time this season that there were no previous race winners on the podium. Monza was obviously the first. So it's just crazy. I feel like they're basically two peas in a pot. It's just crazy that a very, very similar storylines for both Monza and this Sakhir Grand Prix. Like Kyle said, the Pedro Rodriguez, the last time a Mexican driver won a race was in 1970 at the Belgian Grand Prix. Perez is the second driver to do so, and then 190 starts that Perez started with from his debut to his first ever win this past weekend. And the final one, this might be a bit of a crazy one.
Okay.
George Russell has led the third most laps out of anybody this season after this race.
Oh my God.
Behind, obviously, the Mercedes duo. Max Verstappen has still not led more laps than George Russell did in this race. Obviously, with the 87 laps distance that George Russell had this year, Russell led for about 50 or so laps. That's more than Max Verstappen has this entire season. So,
wow.
Yeah, I thought that stat was like a great way to end that.
That one was good. Wow.
Whoever found that stat, it's not very difficult to find, but that's a very interesting one. So Mercedes still keeps that top 3 now in terms of lead lap or most laps led this season. Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I had to reread it a couple times.
That's going to confuse a lot of people in the history books. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I know. It is. So that's the stats that I've got. Not too many, but very important ones. Obviously, Perez is the big one, and that Russell one was a nice way to end that little segment. So any final thoughts on the Sakhir Grand Prix, Kyle, before we move into the Snowball Derby?
Just another spectacular race this season. We've been spoiled with a couple really, really good ones here.
Yeah.
Let's hope that we end the season well in Abu Dhabi. Of course, the track isn't necessarily known for being spectacular racing, but you know what? 2020's been crazy, so maybe we get a good race in Abu Dhabi or something. We'll see. But just kind of crazy that after everything that's happened this year, We're coming down to the final big one of the season, and that's the F1 finale. It's kind of crazy how everything's gone.
That's it. It's crazy that we're almost at the end of the road. Obviously, on Thursday, we're expecting to know if Hamilton will be racing for Mercedes.
We'll know
this
by
weekend.
Thursday.
So we'll see if Russell's back in the car for a second chance at glory here. What a story that would be. Go from failure to triumphant victory in Abu Dhabi if it goes on that way, if he can beat Bottas over there in Abu Dhabi. But if not, we're going to welcome Lewis Hamilton back with open arms, and we'll see how he comes back in his send-off in his 7th championship-winning season. So both great storylines, no matter how you want to look at it. If you want Russell back in the car, if you want Hamilton back in the car, it's going to be fun to watch the Mercedes go at it no matter what the duo is for that team next week. And I don't expect them to make any more mistakes next weekend like they did this one in Sakhir. But saying that, it is 2020. So F1 delivers once again with no other racing on besides itself. It's just, as Kyle said, we've been absolutely spoiled this season with the amount of different storylines, different races. I mean, when NASCAR ended, I'm sure we were expecting, we can go through these kind of race recaps relatively quickly, but it has been anything.
F1 stepped up their game.
They stepped up their game, and it has definitely not allowed us to have the creativity in terms of ideas that we maybe would have wanted by now, as it's already a month over since the NASCAR season ended, and we've only done one kind of special thing.
Oh my God.
But since your shirt with the Chase Elliott champion was crowned champion, so it's been almost a month already since then, and we've had very little time for creative ideas, but we can't complain with the racing product.
I'm not going to complain.
We're going to bring it to you here at the Green Flag. So great Sakhir Grand Prix. Congratulations to Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, and of course Lance Stroll, who's maybe an afterthought after that podium celebration, but nonetheless a spectacular weekend in Bahrain. Crazy storylines in the desert there in Bahrain as well through the 2 weekends that we were there, starting off with Romain Grosjean and then evolving over the past week and a half or so. It's just been F1 at its finest to see the community rally around certain events with Romain Grosjean's spectacular crash that thankfully he's still with us today after the safety that we have in the sport, and the measure that has been taken to hopefully improve it and make sure that we are even safer going into the future, and the opportunities that arose after Hamilton's COVID positive test. We're wishing him all the best in his recovery, and we'll see if he's back next week, as I said. And then Russell with his debut, Aitken as well, finishing the race, which was a good thing. Fittipaldi finished the race as well, so can't forget about them on their F1 debut. So a solid entrance into Formula One for them. They will be both back in the cars this weekend if Hamilton is not able to return. So we'll keep you updated on that on the Thursday episode of the Green Flag. But that does it for the Sakhir Grand Prix this weekend. So we move into the last part of today's episode, the Snowball Derby. It's going to be relatively quick. It was a great battle. I watched the majority of it. I had it on. I mean, if you didn't know, I'm kidding. I'm not going to go into the Eric Jones thing. I'm not going to do that this time. But some great battles throughout the race. Chase Elliott came from the near the rear of the pack in this one after winning the last chance qualifier to finish third in the Snowball Derby. So one-ups his Cup competitor there in Kyle Busch, who finishes 7th. Disappointing day for Kyle after a strong start to the race. Seemed like he had speed. The second and third stint really fell off for the Rowdy Energy Toyota late model, I guess it is. I don't know what the heck the Camry. Is it a Camry?
Yeah, I think it's Camrys, but I don't know.
Camry. Late model cars are just super late model cars are just they just look so good. Remind me of the old Xfinity cars, but nonetheless, it was a great battle at the end of the race between Derek Thorne and Ty Majeski. The last 30 laps were spectacular. Thorne was really struggling on the older tires, and then they had a competition caution with about 28 laps to go. And Majeski got the lead 1 lap prior to that, so that put them. They all come down pit road, change their tires, make adjustments that they need to for the short run to the end of the race. And Majeski got to control the next restart because you keep your position when you come down pit road. You leave the same for this event. So Majeski got the lead, and he got a good jump on Derek Thorne, and Thorne drove it into turn 3 and 4, got her on the outside and stayed in second, which was very impressive because the outside line is definitely at a disadvantage. And they had a good battle there. There was a caution for another car before it all ended there. So 5 laps green to end the race, excuse me. thinking Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Can you blame me? But nonetheless, the Snowball Derby came down to a 5-lap shootout between Ty Majeski and Derek Thorne, where Ty Majeski closes the deal and gets his first Snowball Derby victory. Very aggressive racing. They traded the lead multiple times in the final 5 laps, beating and banging. Good old classic short track racing. You'd love to see it. And nobody got penalized. Nobody got disqualified for the rough and tumble, because the night previous, Stephen Nasse got disqualified for his bump and run. I guess it was a very light contact that ended sent the car in front of him spinning. So we didn't get that this time around. Chase Elliott was right there to pounce if any of them, if they got into contact, and he would have definitely been the victor if it did come down to that. But congratulations to Ty Majeski. A bit of an up and down year for him. Obviously ran full time in the trucks for the majority of the season. And then something happened over there at Nice where he was unable to finish the season, and they decided to part ways. So he's just been a perennial short track guy his entire life. He's just been so consistent, so good. This was his first. This is the biggest short track event of the year for these guys, and for him to execute that was a great sight to see. So I know you didn't get to tune in for most of it, Kyle, but you got to see the end of the race. So Ty Majeski, the victor of the Snowball Derby.
Yeah, I didn't get to catch most of the race, but I did catch that final restart. And yeah, very, very happy for Ty Majeski. He finally breaks through to win the Snowball Derby. We know him mostly over his career for his efforts in late models in the short track scene. And for him to go out and get that win finally in that marquee event is great to see. As you mentioned, in a year that has been pretty tumultuous for him. He gets that full-time Truck Series ride with the team that looks to be pretty solid in Nice Motorsports, but then Nice Motorsports kind of disappoints this year not having that GMS alliance. And by the last race of the regular season, ending that full-time relationship, Trevor Bayne stepping in temporarily for him. And we still don't really know exactly what happened there. But unfortunate the way that his Truck Series season ended, and for him to finish off this year with that win in the Snowball Derby. It's great to see for him. Hopefully he can land on his feet going into next year. Maybe he can find another ride in the Truck Series going into next year, because this guy definitely does have talent. It's just kind of finding some stability for him. He hasn't had that in his career to this point, and hopefully we can see him progress here, because he is still pretty young. And picking up the Snowball Derby win is huge for him. Holding off Derek Thorne there, a great finish as well, and a clean finish as well, which is great to see.
Yeah, and I think the lack of practice really hurt him this year. If he had that practice, I think we would have seen a bit better from Majeski, but he was just kind of in the mid-teens to late teens there for him. The majority of the season didn't get to see too much, but that was Nice as a whole, really. They weren't spectacular this year, so I think it was a bit harsh for Majeski to maybe get the boot at the end of the season. We don't obviously know what happened to result in that departure of that relationship, but nonetheless, Majeski proves himself on the short tracks once again. A great little short track there at Five Flag Speedway in Pensacola, Florida. It's just bumpy, and it makes the drivers really have to work. You can see them squirming, and especially in the late model car, the super late model cars, they are just fighting to the nail to try and control those cars, because they just are just fun to drive. So it's always very entertaining to watch those. I grew up watching a couple of short track events over here in BC, so I've seen something similar to that at our local short track. So always fun to see those guys, the Cup Series guys, some big names. Chandler Smith was also in the mix there at the end as well, getting a top 5 finish. So I'm sure that result didn't do any harm in terms of getting that KBM ride that we talked about earlier. But nonetheless, a great Snowball Derby, and congratulations to Ty Majeski on his first win in this huge event for the short track guys. So that's all the news and notes, the recaps, and everything that I've got for today's episode. So it's been a wild one, a very fun weekend full of news and racing. One of the last that we will have for the 2020 calendar season. So, we just go into Abu Dhabi this upcoming weekend, which we'll preview on Thursday. Besides that, there's not much left to do in 2020. So any final thoughts before you wrap up today's episode?
Yeah, just finally here for the Snowball Derby, the one thing that did kind of irk me over the weekend was kind of the lack of masks and protocols and everything that we saw there. But we also kind of expected to see it, but it was just unfortunate, just the scale of it.
It was pretty bad.
It was really bad. But, a great finish to the race itself. Thankfully, it ended cleanly so that there wasn't any controversy or anything. And on the F1 side of things, of course, unfortunate heartbreak for George Russell. But again, his day will come. Let's appreciate Sergio Perez, because what a drive from him, what a victory, and just the storylines write themselves from that. Just a miraculous effort from him.
Yeah, I mean, this was a great weekend to kind of really conclude the penultimate weekend for racing this year. Just a great events to put on by both facilities. Obviously, we would have liked to have seen more safety protocols in place at Five Flag Speedway this weekend for everybody involved. But I mean, I'm not no governor. I'm not no track president. I can't enforce the rules, even though I would have liked to have seen a little bit better effort down there in Florida. But it is what it is, but a great weekend of news, and we'll see if anything else unfolds before Thursday's episode. Maybe we'll get the chance to talk about something fun and creative for Thursday's episode as classes are done, like we said off the top of the show. So we have a little bit more freedom here, a little bit more time as we go into the holiday season. Saying that, though, I've got about a couple assignments that I've got to do, but
so do I.
Nonetheless, it's been a great episode here today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix has in store for us this upcoming weekend, which we'll talk about on Thursday. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. We will talk to you Thursday to preview the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.